Welcome, data enthusiasts. I'm Joseph, co-founder of Zuma Recruitment. We are the consultancy focused 100% on data tech professionals in the Berlin region. And this is our podcast, Data for Good, connecting you with all things data. And today we're joined by Jack Lancaster. Awesome. Jack is co-founder of Spoke.Ai, and Spoke is the Berlin-based, AI-based workplace productivity tool. Jack, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Joseph. Great to be here.
Excellent. Excellent. I understand today our topic is to explore how generative AI can reduce workplace noise.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Yes, let's do it. Okay, so introduce us to the topic. What do you mean by workplace noise, and how can generative AI help in that mission?
Right. So probably as we're even recording now, your computer's pinging with notifications and someone wants to speak to you on Slack or email, or there's a comment for you in another tool. So I think the first thing is just this red icon that we have on all of our apps is not really designed for our mental health, right? It creates this feeling of FOMO that we all have to click into. We have to feel like we need to clear that. And it's impossible within there to really cut through and understand what's important and what's not. And it would be maybe one thing if we were dealing with just one tool, just email or just Slack or whatever, but we're using more tools than ever. So we've got more information than ever across all of those different tools. So what we're really focused on is how we can cut through that noise so that you can focus on what's really important, so that you, of course, get to the most important things first. You don't miss information. And ultimately, you can be much more productive and happy without this feeling of having to constantly be chasing that red dot.
Wow, yeah, I know the feeling. Great. It's ambient, yet, and it's there all the time. It's not one thing; it is another thing. Okay, so when we talk about the workplace, essentially it's for workers, and the easiest example might be office workers. Can you go another step, differentiate between B2C and the customers, and AI for the internal workplace?
Sure. So I think the line has definitely got more blurry with tools like ChatGPT, but also Jasper AI. So, there are plenty of people using these kind of tools day to day for their work. I've got plenty of friends who are software engineers that go to ChatGPT as if it was Stack Overflow and say, how do I solve this problem? Or here's a snippet of code, help me do this. But ultimately, they're all kind of externally facing these tools, right? Meaning that they're not trained on your company data. So essentially, you're interacting with something that doesn't have that kind of specialized knowledge of what's happening specifically within your organization. So there's a proliferation of stuff kind of happening outside that's not trained on your organization. And then when we think about kind of B2B AI, what we're thinking more about, at least with our focus, is how things can understand the context of your organization. So where are you in relation to your colleagues? How does the information flow? How is it prioritized, something for you versus something related to what a colleague needs? So that's kind of an easy distinction for how we can think about it, is where this data source is coming from. So is it just specifically external? Is it trained on the whole internet or whatever? Or is it very specific and understanding your organization specifically?
Interesting. When thinking about company data, I'm immediately drawn to data quality, data privacy, and data accuracy. And I think I'd like to come back to that later. You mentioned also developers. Even developers can use LLMs these days. I wonder, to kind of draw further attention to this, could talk about how workplace productivity has changed in the last 5 years, because it has changed dramatically with AI. What fundamental changes would you pick out?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can look even further back than 5 years and probably look to the inception of email as this idea that suddenly there was, things were going to be solved by having an answer to your question from someone on the other side of the world, immediately, right? And then, of course, email got very noisy, and then there was the proliferation of chat with tools like Slack and Microsoft Teams. And then, of course, in the last 5 years, you had COVID. So people naturally moved away from offices, and a lot of conversations that would have happened, at a water cooler, or people sitting next to each other, or in the hallways, then moved online as well. So of course you've had more and more communication happening via video call. Like we're on Zoom now rather than maybe recording this in person, had we both been in the same place. So you've got more on Zoom, but you've also then got more instant messaging communication. And then every tool you have and that you use now also has a comment function, right? So if you're in Notion, you're leaving a comment, you're tagging someone. If you're in Jira, it's the same. If you're in Miro, you're commenting on a board and tagging someone. So what you have is more information than ever, more messages, more calls, more comments, and all of that is stacking up. And if we look at where we are now with generative AI over the last 6 months or so, tools like Notion have started to build that into the product, right? So with Notion, you can now, create content with generative AI, or you can be in a Miro board and start it generating stuff for you there. So we're actually at this kind of precipice now where we think we've got a lot of information as it is, but actually it's going to increase and increase exponentially as all of these tools start creating more and more within themselves. So generative AI on its own is not necessarily this kind of perfect tool to actually solve the problem. There will be more and more noise happening in all of these tools, and it's about how we use actually the technology in order to resolve this.
Mm. When you talk about all these productivity tools stacking up and stacking up, I think of the emoji with the exploding brain. Perhaps they all have the intention of increasing productivity, but combined together, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
If I might ask bluntly, then, how can we improve productivity and cut the noise? What do you propose, whether it be through your product solution or otherwise?
Right. Yeah, everyone, will have had that feeling of that you just described, of the exploding head emoji. And I think it's that point at which you reach this inflection of, now it's impossible for me to decide anything because the pile's got too big, right? And I think that definitely is part of the reason why we started this, because we had that feeling so many times, right? So just to give some background, I was at N26 for 3 years, and from the company growing from 90 people to 1,500 people over that time, it just got worse and worse and worse, the problem, right? And you were inundated with more and more and more information. So that was that. And now with more noise, how do we start to solve it? So the key things that we believe are that you have to understand what's not interesting for you. And that's one thing, is like right now you have this red dot and you feel, okay, there's an unread Slack channel, there's an unread notification here. I need to go in there and find out what that is. And what that means is typically, let's say it's in Slack, often reading through a bunch of messages, whether that's in a channel or in a thread, to actually deduce that yourself. So you're spending that time actually investing in it. And often then you get to the end and go, all right, that was actually, that wasn't so relevant. So the first thing is actually filtering out relevant and irrelevant to you. And we can do that with summarization. So that means actually using that generative AI to take a lot of inputs and to turn them into something that's digestible for you. And we can do that in a couple of different ways. We could give you a long paragraph that says, this conversation is about blah, 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 or we could say, make it a bit more action oriented. So, Jack and Joseph discussed this bug and the outcome is that blah, blah, blah will happen. So we can kind of take that data and then structure it for you in different ways to make it valuable and to give you an output. And what it means is that when you've got that output, that you can actually choose to engage with or to ignore that thing, but you can do it with peace of mind, right? We hear all the time about people saying, yeah, I just don't bother to read all of these Slack channels because, there's no way I can get through all of that. But it happens all the time that there's actually really important information in there, that there is relevant stuff. So people's way of solving the problem now is, I'm just going to put that in a box, don't touch, right? I can't even begin to unpack that. So what this does is allow you to decide whether to engage or not. And that's the first part. The second part is actually around prioritization. So, there's all of this important stuff happening. Which of it is most important? Which of it do you need to respond to first? It's always incredibly frustrating when you go through at the end of the day all your unread notifications and you realize that there was something in there where someone was really blocked waiting for an answer for you, for example, or you're coming to a busy conversation late and there's always already been a decision made where you would have wanted to give input on that. So really working out what is crucial, critical, what's urgent, what's, maybe awaiting your feedback, awaiting a decision, and filtering for you in that way and prioritizing according to those things so that you can know where to focus first. And what that prioritization looks like for different people means different things, right? As a founder, that might be unblocking the team with a quick decision. But as, a product manager, that might be, asking for feedback from other people and working out when you need to intervene to actually get all of them to give that feedback by a certain time, for example. So on the first side, we've got kind of summarization, so you can cut through and understand, what is important, what's not important. And on the second side, prioritization, so you can really zoom in on those key things to action. And then if we go kind of beyond there and we start thinking about how you actually reply to things, then we can create a lot of value around the quality of the answer you write and the speed with which you write. So if we think about it that, when you typically respond to someone, when you weigh in on a conversation, let's say I ask you, when is this feature coming? You have to say, all right, I'm going to go and open my roadmap document maybe, or board in Miro. I'm going to look that up. I'm going to go to Jira. I'm going to check that, all right, these tickets are due on this date. And then I'm going to go and check our product specs over in Notion, right? So you do this kind of triangulation across all of these tools, and then you go back to Slack or email, and then you start writing the answer, right? So flicking between all of those different tools has taken you a long time, and putting that answer together has taken you a long time. And maybe, you include the wrong link or you forget to look somewhere. We can then use AI to actually assemble that answer for you, include automatically those links and help you get that sent out more quickly. So then we can think about it as, so far we've got kind of the summarization, we've got the prioritization, we've got the speed and quality of answering. And then the very final part is around kind of following up with people. So every day we send all of these messages, there's all of this outbound communication. Hey, Joseph, can you do X? Can you send me Y, etc.? And we all keep a lot of this in our heads. Remember to get Joseph to do X by Thursday. Yeah. And a lot of that falls through. And what we can do is actually understand when there's something that you're waiting for feedback on, right? So something that you've sent out, this kind of conversational workflow goes in two directions, me sending you something and you actually taking on something and doing it on your side. And we can understand that outbound communication. So we can get you through, deciding what to focus on, prioritizing that, answering that, and actually getting to a resolution to make sure it gets fully completed end to end, and we can improve that workflow 20x.
Thanks for summarizing all of that information. If I think about having all these different tools and platforms and having to consolidate and summarize myself, it's going to take a lot of time. And there's also a risk of judgment call. My brain is tired. I'm working too hard. If we have an AI tool to do this, potentially the risk is less. But what is the risk of information being omitted and not counted?
I think it's not only stuff going missing, it's there are other, I think, two other kind of areas or risks that you can have, right? And you're absolutely right that it can also come from humans. It's the same, people, we miss information all the time, right? We're not perfect. It's the same, I think, analogy as with the self-driving car. You can have self-driving cars can crash just as humans can crash, but there's a level of, do you accept that from technology, from AI? But I think we can look at the three categories as kind of missing information, of course. Did the models miss something? Was something not there? Was a person missed? We can look at stuff as being miscategorized. That's the second. Did it misunderstand that something related to something else? And the third is what's called hallucination. Did it make something up, right? Did it say Jack and Joseph also discussed that they were going to do blah, 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 when actually we hadn't discussed that at all? And so these three risks are present, in every piece of AI that we use. What we need to do is make sure two things. One, that there are humans in the loop to address that, to start with. So, every summary is a summary, but that it has the chance of missing something, so you need to be careful of the circumstances in which you're using something, of the use case. Are you summarizing a legal document for a contract? That sounds a bit risky, right? Where your margin for error is very, very low. Or are you discussing something, more general, where you're giving people a gist and they can dig in, around a discussion of a feature, for example, that you're building and you're putting on your roadmap? So understanding those use cases is, I think, really important. But keeping humans in the loop so that they can check and give feedback on stuff is essential. Meaning, like, does this summary look right? People can give feedback on something like that. Is this prioritization correct? Again, people can give feedback. And there's a huge component of trust, which is essential in these things. Is trust is definitely not given, it's earned. And you have to demonstrate to people, not once, but over time, continuously, that you are taking the right action, and that they can undo something, that they can see the other side of things. Within our tool, when we mark a notification as high priority, we have to explain to you, and this is essential, why we've marked it as high priority, or why, if something's low priority, it's the inverse. And at the moment, I think in general, and this is one of the criticisms of a lot of the models that exist out there, is that the explainability of decisions isn't quite there. And that's something that we put a lot of focus on to create trust. Is you have to understand why we came to a certain decision. Why did we prioritize this? Was this summarized in the right way? And with opportunity for you to give feedback along the way. And then, of course, the goal is to use this feedback to train and improve and get better, right? So if it's prioritization algorithm for your notifications, it should understand your preferences better and better over time. It shouldn't remain stupid. It needs to understand and get better for you. So if we look at those risks, then they're of course there, but keeping humans in the loop to better them and to improve them allows us to actually continually improve and train and get more specialized, not only in general, but also specialized for your specific use case.
And we are seeing already great improvements in data model training all the time, with the help of human ML engineers constantly training and maintaining. A topic that we mentioned at the beginning was around data quality, but also data privacy. When consolidating information from different tools and platforms, what issues might we face in terms of data privacy, if any?
Yeah, so first, on the data quality side, you have, of course, a lot of different data across tools. So you have structured data and less structured data, or unstructured data. And what we need to do is actually invest a lot of time and resource in making sense of that. Like, if you put shit data in, you get shit data out, obviously. But I think more important is, of course, the privacy and security argument. I think that, we see concerns from companies all the time saying, and if you look at the ChatGPT app that's being developed for Slack right now, lots of people are saying, I don't want my data to go over to ChatGPT. What we don't want all of that leaking there. So I think what's really, really important is investing in the ability for people to deploy, either on premise or to have specific models trained only for them and their company data, but also to, in the initial step, actually abstract as much kind of personally identifiable or company identifiable information as possible. So, what we do from the outset is already always strip out, name and email address and phone number when we're sending data to models to make sure that there's nothing leaked there, but also going, a step beyond and then seeing, okay, what is specific to this organization? What can we keep internally there? And I think that treating this data securely is essential. And let's not kid ourselves. All of the tools that we're using have access to company data, right? Jira understands all of everything that you're building. Slack understands every conversation that's happening. Email, the same. Notion, every piece of documentation. So let's not try and pretend that there's no data out there. It's about limiting and understanding what data is shared, and being intelligent around the way that we can minimize that sharing of unnecessary data. So not spreading everything as widely as we can just for the sake of it.
I will reserve my opinion about what we've given up already with respect to data security and data privacy, and we often do on a daily basis on these social media apps.
Absolutely.
With Jack, you're a representative of Spoke.Ai, and I wonder, your answers are comprehensive, which is fantastic for me and for anybody who's listening and watching. I wonder, personally speaking, and from the human perspective, what areas of AI and the workplace interest you the most?
For me, I think it's about the problems that I've experienced, right? So if I think back to my time at N26 and in other organizations, what were the lowest points for me were those feelings that you described of the exploding head emoji. Was like, what the fuck? I can't possibly keep up with this, or there's so much going on. How am I supposed to keep an overview of that? Or I've missed something, and this constant feeling of chasing a state of inbox zero is actually too simplistic. It's not really about inbox zero. It's kind of stress level zero, or FOMO zero, right? We are all at this stage where we just feel like we're constantly basically chasing things, right? And I think the thing that I find appealing and really compelling about where this can go is that we are able to actually take a step back and think, yeah, I'm on top of stuff. I've done the things that I need to do, and there's not a red dot telling me otherwise, right? And I'm convinced that I'm working hard and I'm doing it in the right way to push the needle for my organization. I'm not working on something superfluous. I'm not spending my time on random stuff, but that I'm really focused on the right things, and that I know I'm focused on the right things, and I'm getting through that rather than just through the never-ending barrage of broader information, because that's a task that we all set ourselves, which is just impossible to reach. And I think that leads to a lot of cognitive overload, obviously, and the mental health implications of that are clear. We constantly feel like we are going towards burnout because it's just this excess of information. So if I think about what I want to do this for, it's a little bit selfish in that I want to do it for my old self, right? I want to start to solve this problem for who I was. And if I think about Jack, the product manager back at N26, I would like to think, oh, I could have stayed in that organization longer because I would have been able to deal with more of this information and more of the kind of chaos that came with it. So I think about it, partly from a selfish perspective of that, but also, of course, for all of these users that we speak to every day who say, oh my God, I go home, like I close the computer because I can't do it anymore, rather than like satisfying.
Everybody can relate to this. If you sit at a computer, at least you can relate to this challenge. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder, every single day I see new AI-based productivity tools emerging. If everybody is on the bandwagon and every business is getting more AI enabled, where will we get to next, or where can machine learning take us to next in terms of the workplace?
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing, I mean, obviously I mentioned that, tools like Notion are, and everything else is building more AI into their tools, right? And this will, lead to more noise and blah, blah, blah. But I think that where we're going towards, and this is actually the most exciting part, is a fully connected ecosystem of tools. And what do I mean by that? That means that, when you're working in a Jira ticket, it understands context of a Slack message, which understands context of a Notion page or whatever. So having this kind of triangulation between these things, I think is a really exciting, way to move, or a direction to move in. And I think that what we're going to see is, like, right now, AI is embedded in the tools that we're using. So it's by its nature, essentially like defined by the interface that you're looking at. Where will we go to? It will be much more ubiquitous and much more deeply embedded. So you won't even necessarily see that you're interacting with something. Or with ChatGPT right now, you write a prompt, right? You say, write me a recipe for this cake or whatever that I want to bake. Or, in the business context, help me, solve this, help me fix this bug, right? Or whatever like that. But what's going to happen is actually much more of this prompting is going to be implicit, so you'll get sent a notification, and in the background, the prompt will have already been sent based on the notification that's come in, right? So you're going to get then be presented with an answer. So what I'm trying to say is that a lot more of this AI will be baked into workflows in maybe less visible, explicit ways. You'll still see the outputs of that and you'll see the value of it, but it won't feel quite so manual, right? Now it's, I go to an AI, I write something, I get a response. But where we're going to is that you won't have to write that thing and get that response, because it will be baked into the work that you're doing on an ongoing basis, intelligently connected between tools, and deeply in your workflows. So it will be less kind of, less external to what you're actually doing.
Fantastic. As we reach the end of our time, I wonder, in the spirit of Data for Good, the podcast, you've given so much, or you've described so much of how productivity can be improved and data is for the better. I wonder, you have an established team and of data professionals working with Spoke.Ai. I think of our Berlin-based data community, and I think of data scientists and data analysts. If they are to remain cutting edge in their tool sets, what would you recommend that they start researching, stay close to, start spending their learning time on?
Oh, that's a tough question. I wasn't expecting that one. Now I'm the teacher. Yeah, I think there's obviously so much stuff around generative AI in particular, and AI at the moment, right, that you could read. So I think you could easily drown in that noise as well, and struggle to get through that. I personally, there are a couple of blogs that I read and I follow, especially around kind of how data is applied, or AI is applied into actually solving real business problems. And I think that's super interesting. So I think find a couple of people who are writing about it in a way that resonates with you, and read what they're writing. There are also a lot of people, because it's such a new topic, who there's a lot of hot takes, let's say, which is also to a certain extent to be expected, right? The space is moving so fast. But I think keep your ear to the ground, pay attention to people whose writing you like, whose opinions you respect and which resonate with you. And I think the main thing is also play around with stuff, right? Like there's so many things out there. You can, even my mum is playing around with GPT-3, God knows how. Sorry, Chat GPT even. So, go and play with these things. Now you can also try out a lot of LLMs, large language models you can run locally, right? So the Llama model from Meta is available now, kind of open source, and people can go and play around with that. So I think if you have the technical capability, go and look what people are building in the open source community, play around with stuff yourself. And I think diving in head first and thinking about actually a problem that you're facing every day and trying to solve that is an interesting way of kind of working with this stuff and getting it into your workflow and learning about it in a way that feels natural and organic.
And it seems like it was certainly organic for you. You had productivity and noise issues, and you went head first in attempting to solve them. I like that that approach. So data analysts and scientists, as they transition hopefully to machine learning and AI, find something that resonates with you and latch onto it. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Jack, thanks so much for today. Really appreciate your insights and your comprehensive overview of a topic that genuinely affects and annoys us all every day. So yeah, really appreciate your time.
Cool, Joseph. Thanks so much for your time. Great to be here.
Awesome. And for any viewers or listeners, any questions, fire them across to Jack or myself. Thanks everyone, and ciao for now.